Welcome back. The new administration will mean the changing out of about 4,000 political appointees. The remaining career employees, about 2.1 million of them, could be without agency guidance for a little while as their bosses go through the confirmation process. Ron Sanders is staff director at the Florida Center for Cybersecurity at the University of South Florida. He's former chief human capital officer at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and writing about the transition in GovExec. Ron, welcome. It's good to see you again. You write something here that I find somewhat disturbing. You write, over the last 6 weeks or so, I've received a disturbing and unusually high number of calls from colleagues in government describing situations in which they or their co-workers have been reassigned or ostracized for speaking out. What does that say to you about where we are in this transition, Ron?
Well, while it's anecdotal, it certainly isn't a scientific sample. It does suggest a lot of smoke, and where there's smoke, there's fire. Is a purge going on? And Francis, I have to tell you, what I find odd is that typically this happens at the beginning of an administration. New appointees come in, and it's natural that they distrust many of their career executives. In fact, those appointees probably ran as part of an administration pledging to make changes in Washington. But usually within the first 6, 9, 12 months, trust is built. Civil servants help the political appointee understand the lay of the land. The political appointee comes to know and trust the civil servant, especially when it comes to speaking truth to power. And the remaining 3+ years works just fine, and transition is smooth. What's happening this year, and it's unusual, is that that distrust is happening on the back end. And I hope there's not a purge going on, but I think there is fair warning that that's something somebody ought to be looking into.
All right, that concept of truth to power you point out in your GovExec piece as the #1 obligation, the #1 responsibility that careers have to politicals. Why so, Ron?
Well, I think that's the reason for having a career civil service, a professional civil service, is to say to, particularly at the top layer, we're talking about senior executives, individuals that have a direct reporting relationship to a new appointee. You got to tell them the way it is. You got to speak truth. This is what the program allows you to do. This is what the law says. This is current policy. If that appointee wants to change it, there are ways to change it. I, for one, have never, ever counseled career civil servants to say to a new appointee, can't do that, tried it, it failed, stop. I think we are always in the business of giving that appointee options, but it is in those options that truth must prevail. Here's the reality of the situation. You may have pledged to change the world, and we can help you change the world, but it may take a little bit more time than just issuing an administrative fiat. So it's that function that I believe a career executive has to perform, particularly with an incoming administration.
You write about federal employees weighing their options when they're asked to do something. What is the difference, Ron, between subordination and doing what that employee thinks is the right thing or is the moral thing?
Well, that's a really tricky one, Francis. Again, on one hand, we serve the government of the day, and if an official of that government of the day gives us a lawful order, we should follow it. On the other hand, as I point out in my piece, not all laws are clear. In fact, most of them are written to be deliberately ambiguous. Not orders are clearly legal. And at the end of the day, I think the reason we have a career civil service, and this makes some people nervous, but the reason we have a career civil service is to deal with that ambiguity and ask, is this in the interest of the nation? And respond accordingly. It's a matter of personal conscience. I would never counsel a civil servant to do one thing or the other. There are no easy answers here. There are only very hard questions and individual personal matters of conscience that have to be addressed.
We just have a couple of minutes left, Ron, and there's 2 more things in your piece. There's a lot more in your piece, but 2 more things in particular that I want to ask you about. One is that you counsel people to know when it's time to resign and know when it's time to go underground. How do you know either one of those, Ron?
Well, you don't. Again, no easy answers, just hard questions. Resigning is a grand gesture. it's liberating, but you lose your seat at the table. You no longer have that informal backroom influence with a new administration. So the stakes are high, and they better be worth it if you're going to go public, because you do burn some bridges. I've burned them myself. Going underground, particularly if it's in the interest of the nation, to take what is otherwise a lawful order, but say to yourself, wait a minute, if I do this, it's contrary to the clearly stated policy objectives of the duly elected incoming administration, and it's going to be really hard to undo. In effect, it binds them, even though the people have spoken. And again, I can't give civil servants the easy answer to that. They got to ask the question, and at the end of the day, the question is it for the good of the nation? You got to answer that.
Tough choices to make between now and next Wednesday for some people, Ron. Thanks very much for coming on the program.
Thank you, Francis. Thanks for the opportunity.